Yes, I would like to know how selling a chip differs from selling an ecosystem and services. Therefore, I believe there are many people who are not semiconductor experts, but who have a hazy understanding of them, such as Intel selling chips, which is excellent. This type of situation involves ongoing expenses for software platform, system maintenance, and service revenue after the GPUs are sold. Could you describe how this operates for the viewers who aren't actually on the ground here? Oh, how many chips will they sell isn't the only question. In fact, it looks more like Apple in the end. Indeed, they sell a lot of iPhones. What else occurs in terms of money after that? Indeed, I believe that Apple is a wonderful analogy because, in my opinion, when this firm is compared to Nvidia, many viewers say, oh, it's iPhone, which is ultimately what this company does. Services have accounted for the largest portion of Apple's valuation shift. I think it's worth 1.7 trillion there. There is more to Nvidia than just processors. The platform and architecture as a whole are basically businesses saying, okay, we're going to buy the drink, we're going to buy the meal here, but now we're going to have to pay them an incremental 30 to 35% every year, essentially in perpetuity, on services as well as on infrastructure and on software, correct? That's the distinction. When you think about it, you notice that Intel, for example, is the reason why you would find their tick if you searched for disaster in a dictionary, is because they never understood whether it was because of bureaucracy, because they lost their genius, or something else entirely. Jensen was always aware that developing the CPUs and GPUs was not the only method to win the prize. It had to do with the architecture in general. For this reason, they have effectively cornered it when you look at what they have done. To put it another way, this should be similar to going to a baseball game in that, eventually, every food and drink you purchase supports the same seller, correct? From Nvidia's point of view, that is essentially what they have done. Who builds on top of it today, though? Hyperscalers who speak second, third, and fourth include Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apps, ServiceNow, Salesforce, and Workday. All of this is based on the output of Nvidia. Additionally, there is a changeover cost. Developing AI services based on Nvidia architecture is more complicated than simply saying, oh, AMD has a 20% cheaper chip. We'll just start swapping them in. That's not how it works, in my opinion. Am I correct? Switching may cost 2 or 3 times as much, right? Simply said, switching costs are nearly impossible. Look, that's very different from, say, Dell, SAP, or Microsoft. You go through the WID standards list, Why? It is your responsibility to standardize not just your IT staff, but also your users and applications. Isn't that correct? Even while everyone knows that Nvidia is far ahead of the curve in terms of technology, the execution as a publicly traded company is truly amazing. That's why I want to go over some charts. I believe you might see the first chart we have up here, Dan. This represents Nvidia's Q2 2025 fiscal year operating margin of 62.1%. That's what they captured then. As you can see from the blue chart, they are investing heavily, but their operating margins are still in the low to mid-60s. They are far higher than they were in the 50s 4.5 quarters ago, and they aren't dropping off at all. We haven't seen a business do this before, I believe. And you know what? They would resemble prominent elderly people in their 80s and 90s if they weren't making enormous investments. Indeed, they would be in their 70s and 80s. The key, after all, is that it is what is emphasized. In essence, the margin profile has doubled, and this is a margin once they've spent, and this enormous spending even begins to slow down. I still think of it this way because it's a free cash flow story. Do earnings tell me it's pricey when you start looking out 5 or 6 years? Given the magnitude alone, it's difficult to notice that. All right, let's examine the earnings. The following figure shows quarterly sales, which reached $30 billion in the second quarter of 2025. Estimates indicate that it will be $32.8 billion in the upcoming quarter, $36.2 billion in the 2 quarters that follow. And once more, it's nearly unthinkable for a business to keep increasing its revenue to this extent after it has grown to be the biggest in the world, yet they are doing it. In a way, then, these are quarterly figures. We're looking at a business that is already generating over $100 billion in revenue annually and isn't going anywhere. No, I mean, all the calculations point to a yearly average of $2,250. Since Jensen and Nvidia are receiving all of these capex objectives, I don't understand how it nearly doesn't reach there given overall demand. Okay, AMD, they get 10% share, you may say at this point. However, that doesn't alter the narrative. It's clear where the money is going. And now, and this is crucial, Jensen is discussing the call and what we have observed from customers, the ROI, the use case, as the use cases proliferate. The train is that. The train is not stopped by anything. We used this chart on the channel a few days ago, but I don't have it with me now. The top 5 NVIDIA clients are displayed in a chart with the percentage of NVIDIA's sales on one axis and the dollar amount and percentage of their own capital expenditures on the other. To put it another way, I believe that Microsoft spends about 45% of its capital expenditures on NVIDIA, which accounts for 19% of NVIDIA's total income. Despite your disagreement, the bears would argue that this is the least sustainable section of the foundation. Make us more comfortable with that degree of focus. Perhaps the hyperscalers are only in the middle of an end-user story. That means that 95% of the hyperscalers, like Microsoft, are enterprise. So put it another way, if you're a Microsoft shop and you're following this route, it's via Microsoft. No one else will experience what you will, whether it's Google or Amazon. You will encounter other hyperscalers. Since Microsoft isn't exactly a customer, I believe that when you talk about concentration today, it's more about perception. That doesn't truly convey the picture, in my opinion, because you have to go down to the thousands of businesses. The end user is the most important factor. In the midst of all of this, hyperscalers essentially act as a middleman. Everything as well as they travel through the computer that they are buying from NVIDIA. In the event that Josh Brown then shows up and places an order through Microsoft, which then places it through NVIDIA, the order will appear through Microsoft, but it was actually placed through you and me. The point is that, among other things, we'll be spending the next few weeks in Asia. From the standpoint of demand, everything we observe is growing. And when I say things like, the bears can find the AI revolution in 104, their New York City office building, Metro North Jersey train, or the spreadsheets, I believe that's where many people have missed it. What's been lacking, especially now that Apple is involved? The article for the consumer. You currently own an iPhone 16. The consumer revolution is yours. For the past 4 years, you have 300 million iPhones that have not been updated. All of that now applies to Apple. Nvidia will undoubtedly benefit greatly in the long run, followed by OpenAI. If you want any changes made, please let me know.